This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Georgia United Credit Union. Busy Monday coming up from us, looking at everything that happened in Knoxville this past Saturday, the good, the bad, kind of everything in between. We'll talk to John Stinchcomb about that. We'll get Stinch's thoughts on what was a dominant second half and maybe a little bit of a slow start to the first half. We'll try to cover all of that in great detail. And, of course, before we're done with our video, we'll have time to take a lot of your comments there as well. It is all on the way next as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Georgia United Credit Union, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Georgia United Credit Union. Show your team pride with the Georgia Bulldogs debit card. Check out gucu.org/GoDogs for more details.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, by now you kind of know the story from this past Saturday. It was 43-14. That's the final score. However, for a long time in that game, it did not seem like Georgia was necessarily heading in that direction. But the Dogs ultimately kind of go out there and get the win against the Tennessee Vols and make it look easy at the end, although it was a little bit of a scuffle there in the first half. And I think how you feel about that in a large way kind of depends on who you're kind of hanging around with during the game. I'll give you a quick example of this. So obviously during the game, I'm a part of our forum chat at forum.dawgnation.com. Many of you were a part of that with us. Some of you are monitoring the game on social media. And I think the more you kind of leaned into the direction of social media on Saturday, the more you saw a lot of things that you didn't like about Georgia, and the more some of the things that were maybe imperfect about the Dogs' performance this past Saturday, they maybe get amplified just a little bit. And obviously up in the press box, I'm doing a lot of social media stuff during the game, in addition to the regular forum chat at the forum.dawgnation.com. However, when I leave my perch in the press box, which at Neyland Stadium is like way up in the sky, and start heading down towards the stadium, finally get down on the field with about, 5 or so minutes left. I was actually walking down to the field when the Eric Stokes hit and the Tay Crowder scoop and score happened. But when I get down to the field and start talking to some Georgia fans there kind of in the lower level of the Neyland Stadium, kind of behind the Georgia bench and other places where Georgia fans were congregated, the feeling amongst those fans was just a lot different, right? They're not on social media. Many times in a stadium environment like that, you can't really get Twitter or Instagram or whatever during the game. There's just not enough Wi-Fi or whatever to pick something like that up. So the only thing they're having is the experience among their fellow fans, or the experience from being there in the stadium. And there was a lot more happiness, I felt like, from the Georgia fans that weren't in the stadium than there was in the Georgia fans who were maybe kind of having this shared experience on social media. And really after the game, I kind of had that in mind when I saw the Georgia players and coaches celebrating the way they did. By now, you've probably seen Kirby Smart diving into the stands, Lambeau Leap style. You've heard about Jake Fromm singing Rocky Top as he was leaving the interview room in Neyland Stadium on Saturday. And a lot of the audio clips you may hear from Kirby Smart over the next couple of days from that post-game press conference, there's kind of some background noise as Smart speaking, which is a lot of hooping and hollering and celebrating from the Georgia players in the locker room. They deserve that. They go on the road. They get an SEC East win. They work hard for this kind of stuff, and they deserve the chance to celebrate that. But it was in Fromm in particular and something that he said on Saturday that I happen to think was pretty interesting and a great way for us to start DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union here today, and probably a really good piece of advice overall. Now listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat things and tell you that everything is just absolutely hunky-dory perfect with Georgia right now. There are probably some examples of that you can cite for yourself to say, no, this needs to be better. This needs to improve if you want to kind of judge on the basis of a national championship standard. I totally get all of that. However, hand-wringing over every single imperfection and basically going to war over every single blemish for this team on social media, everything else, I don't quite know that's doing much good for anybody either. It's certainly not making Georgia fans happier, and I don't think it's enabling people to enjoy the season anymore. And I thought that Jake Fromm on Saturday, now let me set this up. I thought that Jake Fromm on Saturday had the perfect response to any of this kind of stuff. So what I asked him was, hey, you're really hot out there tonight. You're in a rhythm. It would be later on described by our buddy Chip Towers. He was kind of in the zone. I thought that was kind of a good way to say that. That's exactly what Fromm was kind of like. He was, almost perfect with his accuracy. He's humming the ball down the field. He's just really, really in control of everything. And what I asked him was, obviously, y'all can look at me and tell, those of you that watch the show on video, I'm not this kind of athlete. But when you are that kind of athlete, when you are having that kind of successful moment, when you are so in control of a situation, is that fun? And I thought that Jake Fromm actually gave one of the more interesting answers I've heard from him on that topic. Here is what Jake said.
A lot of people challenged me to have fun tonight, and so that's what I want to do. I wanted to go out and have fun, whether it was 10 to 14, 13 to 14, whatever the score was. I was going to go out and have fun. I think the guys around me just made that easy for me. We were making plays and we were moving the ball on offense. It was fun.
So obviously I'm not inside Jake Fromm's head. I'm not with him 24 hours a day, but I can make an assumption on the basis of what he said. If someone in Jake's life, be it someone connected to the football program or someone connected to him outside of football, if someone felt the need to challenge Jake to have fun, then it becomes reasonable to assume that maybe at some point in time this season, and for whatever reason you might want to imagine, but at some point in time this season, maybe Jake wasn't having as much fun as he could have. It's probably unfair for me to make too many assumptions about that, but it's certainly a reasonable assumption that if someone felt the need to challenge Jake to have fun, maybe Jake at some point this year wasn't feeling like he was having as much fun as he possibly could. So he says, going into this game, I wanted to make sure that one way or another, I was loose, I was relaxed, and we just went out there and had some fun. And Jake says, my teammates enabled me to do that. But if Jake Fromm says, I'm thinking before the game about whatever, let me make sure I go out there and enjoy that, then how much more important is that for Georgia fans as well? It's 43-14 over a rival Tennessee. Was the effort that Georgia gave against the Vols on Saturday good enough to beat Alabama or good enough to beat LSU or good enough to beat Ohio State or Clemson? I don't know, but Georgia didn't play those teams this past Saturday. It did play Clemson. And after getting off to kind of a slow, kind of sluggish start, before it's all said and done, Georgia is kind of rocking and rolling there, and Jake Fromm was a big part of that. And Jake said, hey, in the midst of this, and by the way, what might end up being his last ever trip, it's one way or another, it's his last trip to Neyland Stadium. It might end up being his last ever game against the Tennessee Vols if he leaves this year. I want to make sure against this historic rival, Jake understands the history of the Georgia program growing up in Warner Robins. I want to make sure I go out there and enjoy it. I hope Georgia fans did as well. Hope you didn't spend the entire night arguing about every little, blemish on Twitter. Otherwise, life is passing you by right in front of you, including enjoying a season at the moment that still has the makings of one that might end up being pretty special for Georgia before it's all said and done. Now, of course, some of the issues for Georgia end up being about the comparison stuff and, how does this Georgia defense look compared to the best defense in college football? How does this Georgia offense look to the best offenses in college football? I actually asked Jake that as well. Now, maybe it's knuckleheads like me that keep Jake from having fun on a typical basis, but I asked him, I said, a lot of high-powered offenses in college football, a lot of big-time quarterbacks in college football, big, huge stats, prolific offenses have never been more in vogue in football than they are right now, especially at the college level. I said to Jake, do you feel any pressure as a quarterback to try to keep up with the Joneses when it comes to this kind of stuff? And once again, I thought that Jake had kind of an interesting answer, certainly taking time to at least think about the idea of the comparisons that are out there. Here's Jake again.
No, not really. That's just part of football. Some football, they play it and they explode and they want to, turn the scoreboard way up. For us, we're focused about the game. We want to execute on that drive and go out and score and do whatever we can.
So here's my point in asking Jake that question. While the comparison is going to be ongoing between him and other quarterbacks, especially ones who've been on this roster and other top players in the country, while those comparisons won't stop, it's fine if Jake himself doesn't want to pay attention to those. He says he doesn't. However, from my vantage point of watching Georgia on Saturday, Fromm in particular, I don't think Fromm's play this past Saturday takes a backseat to any quarterback in the country. Mention anybody you want to. I think it'd be harder to have a better game in that spot than what Fromm provided for Georgia on Saturday. So in this instance, in terms of the overall managing of the Georgia offense and moving this offense down the field, I don't think what Fromm did on Saturday takes a backseat to any quarterback in college football, even the ones who are putting up bigger stats than what Jake is putting up right now. I thought it was that kind of night for Fromm. And you know what? Georgia coach Kirby Smart agrees.
He's very confident, especially when he plays these type games, and it's similar to playing our defense. So he sees that every day. There are similarities, and I think that always plays a little bit of an advantage for him because he's very intelligent and he's seeing a lot of the same things that he sees from us, and that helps him.
So listen, let me try to bottom line this and kind of wrap all this up. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to play some audio from Kirby Smart on pretty rough job of the Georgia pass defense at the beginning of the game, the fact that this thing is Georgia deficit at halftime. Georgia only leads by 15 at the start of the fourth quarter, which is not really what you would have wanted for an opponent as overmatched as what Tennessee was supposed to be coming in the game. I'm not going to sit here and tell you there aren't things to be concerned about, but I am going to say this, and I'm trying to do the same thing because, listen, I'll be completely honest with you. I spent a lot of the first half of this game on Saturday, texting back and forth with our buddy Jeff Santel and our buddy Connor Riley. I've got like 3 things I do during game. A few things I'll tweet, a few things I'll put in the forum, and then a few, touchy comments I might just fire off in a text to some of the people that I know really well, and I'm just firing off texts and complaining about this and complaining about that. But ultimately, I really do believe that life is too short for some of that kind of stuff. Georgia went out and won 43-14 against Tennessee. It's going to set up to play South Carolina on Saturday. It's going to get ready for Florida and Auburn and everything to come after that. And you know what? I'm going to do my part to try to enjoy this season. The good moments, I'm going to make sure that I notice them. The bad moments, we're going to talk about it and see if we can figure out how Georgia can get better in that regard. But one way or another, I'm going to try to take Jake Fromm's advice. I think you all should as well. Let's just try to have a little fun. Hey, Dog Nation, my name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Georgia United Credit Union. Really glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio at noon, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have you with us as a part of DawgNation Daily today. And as I said before, we are brought today by our friends at Georgia United Credit Union. Let me make sure you're aware of this, because I know some of you take it as kind of a badge of honor. You want to have everything that has the Georgia brand on it. Well, the next really cool thing to have is the Georgia Bulldogs debit card from Georgia United Credit Union. This is an amazing thing. 3 different design options to choose from when you open your free, and that's an important word, free Georgia United checking account with options to earn interest. By the way, speaking of Georgia United Credit Union, they are a great thing in and of themselves, with 19 branch locations around the metro Atlanta area and access to up to 100,000 surcharge-free ATMs, including advanced security features, convenient access to your money through online banking. Georgia United Credit Union is truly so much more than a bank. So let me give you a website to go to. Sign up is totally easy here. It's gucu.org/GoDogs. Let me say that one more time. Obviously, you're watching on video. You can see it. gucu.org/GoDogs. Great to have Georgia United Credit Union as a part of DawgNation Daily here today. We're going to get our buddy John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment. Before that, let's go also around the doghouse here for a moment, brought to you by Pella Window and Door today. And let me now, after a little happy talk on what Jake Fromm did well on Saturday, let me now transition to a couple of things that did not probably go quite as well as Georgia would have liked to this past weekend. Tennessee, a little bit of an assertion early. Maurer, the freshman quarterback, making his first start, maybe kind of catching Georgia napping a little bit with some pretty good throws. Jim Chaney seemed to have a pretty good game plan early. Georgia fans, justifiably, were not too happy with the way this game begins with Georgia from a defensive standpoint. However, and maybe Kirby's just playing to the crowd here. Maybe he's just choosing not to give the media too much introspection. But when Smart was asked on Saturday night, slow start against Tennessee after also having a halftime deficit against Notre Dame 2 weeks prior. Now, Notre Dame's a top 10 team, so that's not necessarily quite as inexcusable. But, having all of that going on, with all of that kind of being the issue, are you concerned about that? Are you concerned about what does it say about your team? Smart kind of gives a little bit of a joke to begin with and then kind of goes into his answer on that. Here is Kirby Smart on the idea of slow starts.
Says we need to start better. I mean, I don't know that I'm concerned as much as when you start a game, you're going to get new plays and new scripts. I mean, we started pretty well offensively. We just didn't start real well defensively. And we started real well defensively last time and didn't start as well offensively. So we just have to put that together, and our kids got to settle down and play. And, again, like I said, they punched us in the face with the big play, and we responded. And that's what you're looking for in your team. This first time some of our defensive players have taken that punch.
So to hear Kirby Smart say there that, the defense gets off to a little bit of a slow start, but it's not like he's, pounding his fist on the table or anything like that. I mean, he's certainly willing to say, we could probably want to get off to a little bit better start, but it's also not like he's losing his mind over that issue right there, and I think that's kind of interesting. And that particular theme for Smart, the notion of, hey, I'm not going to be as worried about this as maybe some of you think I'm going to. It kind of also comes to pass when it comes to the issue with the secondary there as well. All the pass plays that Tennessee had success with in the first half, what did Smart think about that? Once again, it was kind of an issue where he certainly didn't make as big a deal about it as some other folks did. He just wants to see better tackling. Here's Kirby again.
It worries me, the tackling. That's what bothers me. When they throw and catch the ball with some of the things we're playing, they're going to throw and catch the ball because we're really aggressive. But we got to tackle them when they catch it. We got to get them down right then. We got to force a turnover. We got to pick the ball off when they throw one to us and get an interception. There's a lot of things we got to do better in that perspective. But we're down. We're really down one player in the secondary, and we hope to get him back soon. But at the end of the day, we got to do a better job of getting some balls defended and down. But we put a lot of pressure on our secondary too.
You know, I said this on Saturday night as part of our Pella Window post-game show that every SEC team has got a couple guys that can play. And when it comes to the Tennessee wide receiver core, Callaway and Jennings, Marquez Callaway and Juwan Jennings, they're pretty much going to be able to play for anybody. I mean, they are just, they're pretty good receivers. And I thought that Jim Chaney did do a pretty good job of using those guys on Saturday night. So they get off, they have a little bit of success early. Ultimately, Georgia responds to that. Now, am I going to tell you that you should completely gloss over what happens with the Tennessee passing game early? No, probably not. And as Kirby said, Tyson Campbell's absence alone doesn't necessarily explain that. It's a concern. It's the kind of thing that might cause you to raise an eyebrow just a little bit, but Kirby Smart's not exactly losing his mind over it easy. This is one of those things where, and this is a little bit frustrating for me, but it's just the truth in general. We're just not going to know everything we want to know about this team right now. This month of October, we've already said, is a little bit of a stepping stone and a building ground towards the games that really matter the month of November. You can make a case the Florida game matters more now than we maybe even thought it would. We'll talk more about that later on. I'll certainly share you with my thoughts on that. However, for the most part, Georgia still seems to me to be a team very much on schedule to exactly where we thought it would be, which is competing for every championship this sport offers before the season is done. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And I love Pella Window and Door because they can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. Now, they are a national company, but there's a branch locally owned right here in Georgia, which means you really get the best of all worlds. You get the power that comes from having a national company, and you get the local service that comes from having a family-owned branch right here. And there's also a great deal you can take advantage of right now as well. You can get 50% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 48 months. That's valid through November 14th, so you want to take advantage of that right now. A couple ways for you to get in touch. Find them online at pellasoutheast.us. That's pellasoutheast.us. Or give them a call in their Dunwoody showroom at 404-445-2979. That number, once again, 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia. They are viewed to be the best. All right, we're going to have more on Jake Fromm a little later on. There's also a standout performer from the Dogs on Saturday night, or we'll make sure we discuss. But for now, for more on what happened in Knoxville, let's talk to our buddy John Stinchcomb. Great to have you with us. DawgNation Daily, presented today by Georgia United Credit Union.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always love having John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily on a Monday, and there's a lot I want to talk to John about, and there's a few directions I kind of want to push John in over the course of our conversation, but I want to give him a chance to have the floor to himself to kind of say what he saw on Saturday. So, John, if you don't mind, let me begin right there. Georgia wins 43-14. Little slow in the first half, more assertive from the Dogs in the second half. Of course, the Tay Crowder scoop and score and the defensive stop by the reserves kind of help preserve the scoreboard if you're doing a little scoreboard watching on this. But overall, what were your thoughts on what you saw from Georgia against Tennessee on Saturday?
Well, it was good to see the havoc rate ratio continue to stay high. Aziz Ojulari stood out again this week. But what I was impressed with is the offensive side of the ball. We spoke about it in the Marlowe's matchup last week, BA, that we wanted to see this Georgia offense trust and rely on Jake Fromm more, and boy, did they do it. And he just continues to impress. Such a solid leader. So much is made of his ability to rally the troops, but his ability at quarterback is second to none, in my opinion. Made some really impressive throws. The offense looked like it was clicking. And I thought one of the limiting factors with this offense in the passing game is, this is going to sound a little bit odd, was going to be the offensive line. I think we excel in the ability to lean on people and run play-action pass, and at times have struggled to protect the passer in known passing down situations. And the offensive line looked really solid in the pass game, and at times maybe not so much in the run game when you would expect him to be able to lean on them. But at the end of the day, you cover the spread and beat the dog out of Tennessee, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I want to talk to you about a number of the things you brought up there. I'll get to the offensive line stuff, and you talk about beating the dog out of Tennessee. I think that's also an important subplot in Saturday's game, too. Let me stay on Fromm here just for a moment. I talked about him a lot before you joined us. I want to kind of keep that theme going with you because, as you said, whether it be Marlowe's matchup for us last Thursday or really Georgia fans throughout the season, there's just been this call of, hey, give Jake more responsibility. Allow him to do what he does best. Allow him to move this offense down the field. And I think on Saturday, Tennessee's not a great team. Obviously, this is one of the worst Tennessee teams in a long time, but it's still, an opponent on the road. This crowd had a chance to get in the game. There was still an opportunity for it to be a little bit of a hostile crowd. I think that Fromm showed on Saturday why so many of us have said, give this guy more to do. Let him be more than just a check-down quarterback. Let him be a guy that punishes defenses for their attempt to stop the run. And I thought that Jake validated everything that I've heard a Georgia fan say about how Georgia should use him based on the way that he played on Saturday.
I couldn't agree more. I think he stood out, and that's tough to do when you're as established and heralded as he has been. But to me, it's mighty dangerous for any defense that faces the Dogs now because it has been, we're going to run at you, and then every once in a while we're going to take our shots and play action pass. What Saturday proved to me is that Georgia is willing and obviously very able to sit back in known passing formations and situations, and Jake Fromm can pick you apart like no other. He's arguably the most accurate quarterback in college football, throws the deep ball well, and was able to throw some intermediate routes that some question, does he have the arm strength that some of the other quarterbacks have that are at the top of the list? And he looks sharp on all of them. He just seems to continue to make all the right plays and reads, and got to be really scary for any other defense that Georgia faces, knowing that they have the run game that's been well established throughout this season, but now showing a willingness to open up the offense a little bit and attack them with the arm of Jake Fromm.
So let me transition here for a moment and talk about the rivalry part of this. I'm going to ask you to kind of betray the locker room sanctity here for a moment and kind of let us know what players are thinking in a moment like this. Because I asked Kirby on Saturday, I said, Kirby, you know the history of Georgia-Tennessee as well as anyone does. Because this is a rival for the next 24 hours, do you allow yourself to enjoy it just a little bit more, just given the fact that Georgia and Tennessee have a long backstory with each other? And Kirby, not certainly a surprise to me, says, no, every game's hard to win. Every team we play is a rival, blah, 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 blah. But you do hear Jake Fromm sing Rocky Top, after he was done with his interviews on Saturday. You did see, Kirby, I didn't know this when I asked Kirby the question, but he kind of done a little bit of a Lambeau leap into the stands. And, John, you and I have talked about this plenty because we're kind of the same generation. Georgia-Tennessee is a rivalry. And frankly, I'm glad the Georgia players celebrate that, even if Kirby doesn't necessarily want to pay lip service to that. I'm just kind of glad that that it does matter to them. It actually makes me feel really good to know they had a good time on Saturday night. You could hear the hooping and hollering kind of coming out of the locker room. So as a player, now, as we've said before, you're a little different in the fact that Georgia-Tennessee was a much bigger rivalry when you played there at UGA. But as a player, what do rivalry games like this mean, even if the media is never going to quite hear the unfettered truth about the way that players feel about it? What is the feeling probably for this Georgia team, knowing that it got, a third straight win over Tennessee on Saturday night?
Oh, you love it. I mean, in the locker room, and they're saying and doing all the right things. In the media, to the masses, you downplay it. It's just another game. It's a quality opponent. We have all the respect for them in the world. Those are the right things to say. Behind closed doors, you're high-fiving each other. You're celebrating because you just kicked the crap out of one of your biggest rivals. And, you live in most of these guys, although this is changing, are from the state of Georgia or the surrounding area and have come up knowing that your biggest rivals in this side of the conference, Tennessee and Florida. So when you beat the brakes off them, you better believe there was some celebrating going on. And That spilled out as your quarterback's walking out of the media room singing "Good Old Rocky Top," because Lord knows you don't want to hear that when you're from the other side of the win column, because man, they love to play that song. But when you're up by over 3 scores when the final whistle's blown, that's a fun little tune to tweet out or let loose. So, and then your head coach is Lambeau leaping into the fan section at an away game. You better believe that rivalries mean more.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about SEC football, and Tennessee's one of those teams historically, maybe not in recent history, has been in the discussion, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. All right, let me turn the attention here in our conversation, the minutes we have remaining, to something a little bit more serious here for a moment. Georgia does get off to another slow start on Saturday. This time it's not offense, it's defense. Past defense was really picked apart, and I thought that, I mean, you got to give Jim Chaney credit, because I thought Maurer, a quarterback who may end up being a little bit limited, at least in his first game, they're running those slant patterns, they're running those, passing routes with Callaway and Jennings, and they were having some real success early. I believe, Maurer ended up averaging nearly, like 11 yards per attempt in the first half, which is a pretty impressive performance for a quarterback who was only completing about 50% of his passes. It's not easy to average that many yards per attempt on that small of a completion percentage, but it's now the second consecutive game where Georgia fans didn't see from the get-go exactly what they were probably hoping for. John, on a more sort of serious-voiced analysis here, how concerned do you think UGA fans should be, but the fact that it was a little closer, a little longer than Vegas would have thought, than Georgia fans would have hoped for this past Saturday evening?
I think there's validity to that. I think you look at the past 2 games and the voids that were created either when our defense was in zone. I think they excel when they've been bringing some pressure packages and ask their corners specifically to be in man-to-man coverage situations. I think defenses, Notre Dame and Tennessee, when they're on offense, have found voids in some of our zone coverage that have made some very easy windows, especially for an incoming first start freshman like Maurer, who, first half, he looked sharp. I think the defense changed a little bit, started bringing a little more pressure, playing a little more man, and there weren't quite those same gaping windows for him to find open receivers. So there's some more in-house cleaning that needs to be done. After the Notre Dame game, you talk about, on the offensive side of the ball, trying to challenge either the play calls or the execution thereof to open up the offense a little bit. Well, they answered that call, and this week it's the defense. They're going to have to tighten up in their zone coverage packages so that there's not that much of a void between where the receivers are hooking up and on slant routes and those kind of things and the windows that a quarterback has to throw them in.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And you mentioned the offensive line a moment ago, and of course when we have you as a part of our show, I do like getting your thoughts on that. And I thought it was interesting the way that you said that, because it's almost like, and I've asked you this question a lot this season, it's almost like now we've kind of flip-flopped the narrative where I want to say, beginning part of the season, hey, the Georgia, offensive line is going to make sure, fully protects Fromm, gives him time to throw. Well, on Saturday, for the most part, that's indeed what happened. You saw Fromm have plenty of time to throw, so much so that, he kept the ball forever on that one big, long, completion to DeAndre Swift, for instance. So plenty of time to throw there on that. But there's the 4th and short that Georgia's not able to convert. They also go shotgun from that, which I didn't necessarily love. And, a couple of moments where, maybe from even though the rushing totals end up actually looking pretty good, and Georgia certainly got plenty of running backs involved, but maybe in terms of just lining up and mauling people in a short yardage situation, maybe that's not quite happening as much as you would hope for. Am I making too much of that for even raising that as an issue on a day when the stats themselves actually probably don't look that bad? I don't know. I know you talked about this a little bit before, but would you mind expounding on that a little bit further here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny. I'm still in a text group with some other former offensive linemen at Georgia, and we comment on those kind of things. And one of the fellows sent an article about short yardage play calling and plays. And ultimately the thing was the quarterback sneak is underutilized, and the inside zone with big body personnel is one of the least effective play calls. So Georgia, and much is made of their size. It's the biggest offensive line. Their average is bigger than any NFL line. All those things are true. But at the end of the day, if everybody knows, we're just going to try to line up and go toe-to-toe, that's a difficult situation for any offense. Ultimately, there's more success statistically when you spread them out to run inside, and then you load the box to throw it. You do the antithesis of what the defense is expecting. But so some of the situation is we just feel like we're going to maul you, and we haven't been able to execute on those plays. We haven't been able to get those 3rd and 4th and 1s converted, and I think there is very much something to that.
So it's funny you mentioned the idea of what works in short yardage. I've seen some of the same kind of stuff in the NFL myself, and people can Google me to see if I'm right about this. I'm pretty sure that the quarterback sneak works to convert a first down on 4th and 1 in the NFL because they just keep more numbers like this in the NFL. There's only 32 teams, a little bit easier to measure this stuff. Quarterback sneak works to convert a first down on 4th and short 78% of the time. So, the idea that you're going to outsmart in a play call like that when it's really the quarterback sneak. Even with Georgia's running backs being as good as they are, the numbers right there say quarterback sneak's the most valuable play. Now, you can say, well, Fromm's too valuable, but these NFL teams paying their quarterback $30 million a year. If they're still sneaking with that guy, then I don't think that Georgia needs to try to reinvent the wheel here.
No, and I just pulled up the stat sheet, and it's so inside zone. This is short yardage plays, 3rd or 4th down and short. Inside zone, 68% success getting a first down. Quarterback sneak or quarterback designed run, 88% of the time.
Okay, so I undersold it.
Yeah, one out of 5 more success running a quarterback sneak versus an inside zone. Worst play call you can make on one of those short yardage situations, statistically speaking, outside zone, 66%. So far and above, the best play you can call is a quarterback sneak.
That is the kind of
these are all runs, right?
Of course, right, of course. That is the kind of astute analysis that you get on the Marlowe's matchup every single Thursday. And by the way, 2 Thursdays from now, we're actually back on the road again. Marlowe's in Dunwoody, 1317 Dunwoody Village Parkway. The address, once again, 1317 Dunwoody Village Parkway. That's October 17th. We'll be there at 6 p.m. for our Marlowe's matchup there that evening, kind of talking about everything that's going on with the Georgia Bulldogs, including the big game there that Saturday, which will be the Kentucky Wildcats. We'll be heading towards the Kentucky game that following Saturday. So we'll do that with you Thursday, October 17th from the Marlowe's in Dunwoody, 1317 Dunwoody Village Parkway. It starts at 6 p.m. Hope to see you there. John, we really appreciate you being a part of DawgNation Daily today. I really do love to pick your brain about all this kind of stuff. I just think it's a ton of fun. So thanks for being with us, and we'll enjoy a chance to chat with you again soon.
Always a pleasure, B.A. Look forward to it. It's great to be a dog this week.
Yes, sir. That's well said, John. Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Great to be a dog this week, John Stinchcomb says, and I don't think UGA fans would disagree with that at all. Really good stuff there. We got a lot of SEC Through stuff we're going to do in a moment. I've got a lot on the Florida-Auburn game, as you might imagine, including some people trying to call me out. We'll address that all coming up in a moment. Before that, though, we talk about my friends at MyBookie. A lot of you that either you listen to our shows, you watch our Go With The Flow each week brought to you by R.S. Andrews, and you hear my picks and you say, I know I could pick games better than B.A. does. The honest truth is you probably could. Well, if you can, you ought to make a little money off your expertise by getting involved with my friends at MyBookie. Get a bet down on the game and collect your winnings when you win, because MyBookie, makes it easy to collect your winnings. It's one of the things they are famous for. And something else you'll love about MyBookie is the fact they've got a great incentive for you for signing up right now. Just find MyBookie online. Just type MyBookie into your browser. Find MyBookie online. Then when you get there, use the promo code DawgNation. Then after that, you get a big first deposit bonus. You get up to $1,000. Get your first deposit doubled. And then after that, you play, you win, you get paid. But to get the big deposit bonus as an incentive to you for signing up at MyBookie, got to use the promo code DawgNation. All one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG. Use the promo code DawgNation at MyBookie. Then after that, as I said, you play, you win, you get paid. All right, let's talk SEC through for a moment. Let's talk about Florida and Auburn here for a moment as well. And a lot of people have been asking me, BA, you more worried about Florida now? Or do you feel like you're wrong after having said so much during the offseason about this team ultimately being a disappointment? No, I haven't changed my thought on Florida whatsoever. I still don't think this is an elite team, certainly not in the category of Georgia. And when it comes to the cocktail party, I have a simple message for UGA fans. If you are scared, just say so right now. Because there is nothing I have seen from Florida in the Auburn game, which I got to see a good bit of, even though I was in Knoxville, to make me think that Georgia has any reason to be scared of Florida at the moment. Is this going to be a big game? It was always slated to be that. Can Florida do some things defensively? I can go back and play audio you or video clip of me. I can go back and play all kinds of stuff of me saying that for a long time. Offensively, I didn't necessarily believe in Florida. Defensively, I knew they would present some challenges. That's pretty much exactly the way that things have worked out to be. Now, I know P. Ryan has the big run for the Gators on Saturday, and frankly, Dan Mullen did a pretty good job of getting more out of his quarterback, limited as he is, Kyle Trask, than Gus Malzahn got out of his. But my tune has not really changed about Florida at all. In fact, I feel more right than ever about Florida. They are good defensively, a little bit shaky offensively, and a tough game. But Georgia's used to playing tough games. Georgia's not going to be scared of Florida just because they beat Auburn. This is always going to be a deal where Auburn had more to gain from winning this game than Florida did. Auburn was going on the road on the tail end of what had been a little bit of a tougher stretch to start the season. Florida has had, frankly, no games of consequence up till now, and they had this one at home. So Auburn had more to gain here than Florida did. So I'm not going to give out any kind of first Saturday in October trophies to the Florida Gators here on this. There was a weird moment, though, involving Florida coach Dan Mullen in this game. Did you see this? Halftime, Marlon Davidson had a hit on Kyle Trask. It was a little bit low. Trask eventually returns to the game, as you know. But during a halftime interview, Dan Mullen accused Davidson of a dirty play. It's pretty strongly worded accusations from Mullen in his halftime interview. Probably, emotion of the moment probably aided Mullen's words here. But that was a little bit of a hot button thing for Mullen to say after the game. Mullen didn't know this at the time. Davidson, who was unaware of what Mullen had said, actually found Trask and kind of gave him a hug and some well wishes, and obviously said he didn't intend to injure him. Everybody around the Auburn program seems to think Davis is a really good guy, and so Mullen's words, based on that, look even worse here. So Mullen's going to be careful with his halftime interviews. Can't get too caught up in emotion. It seems like he may have levied an accusation against Davidson that's not exactly backed up by the facts. So Mullen's going to be careful when it comes to that. Now, on the other side of things here for a moment, Gus Malzahn going to take some heat. This is another game in which his defense gave his team a chance to win, but offensively they could not find anything. And obviously Bo Nix, the freshman quarterback, really struggled, and maybe that's the expectation against a good defense on the road. But Malzahn also had a chance to put Joey Gatewood in the game if he wanted to, and he simply didn't do that. He's decided to stay with Nix. Maybe the athleticism of Gatewood, his ability as a runner, may have given Auburn a different dimension to its offense. But overall, that's not the choice that Malzahn made. And it's another example, after all that was kind of said last week, and we talked about some of this ourselves, Malzahn lauded as a bit of a play caller here. But when it's all said and done, it is the Auburn offense that stalls out against Florida. A little criticism there for that. A couple quick also housekeeping notes here. John Rice Plumlee, the Ole Miss quarterback, one-time UGA commit, continues to dazzle as Rebels quarterback. Big performance for him against Vanderbilt. He looks like the real deal right now, and certainly a very, very impressive performance for a guy that a lot of Georgia fans got to know in the recruiting trail. And bad news for Missouri, and you hate to see this. Cale Garrett, who is having an unbelievable season for the Tigers at linebacker, he is now injured and out for the year. I know Kelly Bryant left this game briefly on Saturday as well. He's fine, but Garrett is a big, big loss for a Missouri team that, after shaking off the Wyoming loss to start the year, is starting to play a little bit better. Actually playing much, much better. Garrett's been a big part of that, but he is injured now, and that's bad news for the Tigers, and we'll have to make that our SEC through. All right, before we get back to Jake Fromm here, let me also take a moment to kind of highlight what I thought was one of the big performances for Georgia on Saturday, And it involves Azeez Ojulari, who gets after the quarterback a couple times and just continues to be among Georgia's best individual defensive players, and a guy that Georgia really needed to make this one easy at the end on Saturday night. He's obviously a pretty impressive performer right now, and after the game, Georgia coach Kirby Smart essentially said as much.
Azeez is a great leader on our team. He was captain for this game, and to do that as a sophomore is pretty special, or I guess redshirt freshman, whatever he is. But he leads at practice. He plays the right way. He's everything you want in a student athlete, and it's a credit to his family, and they've done a great job with him.
Yeah, listen, I mean, for Ojulari, it's more than just what he does on the field. It's also, as Kirby said, it's that leadership off the field here. He's not the kind of guy you have to take, out of the game for run-stop situations. He's big enough to do that. He's fast enough to get after the quarterback. He did that again this past Saturday, and I think he's on his way to being one of the real vocal leaders for this team. Certainly, Georgia safety Richard LeCount, when he looks at that group, he sees Ojulari right now leading a group of outside linebackers that can be problematic for opposing offenses. Here is what LeCount said about the group that Ojulari's a part of.
Them young wolves that we got in the room, them boys get after you, man. I'm so proud of them. I always know them boys, third down, first down, no matter what down it is, they're going to get after that quarterback.
And certainly maybe there weren't quite as many times to get Maurer on the ground on Saturday. Obviously, the big one there at the end, Eric Stokes coming on the corner blitz. But this group does appear to be close to breaking out in a big way. And while maybe we look for the entirety of the group to kind of round into full form, for now at least, Georgia's getting an individual performance from Ojulari that is certainly worth bragging about. And as Azeez said, he kind of started the day on the theme of fun, and Jake Fromm saying he wanted to have fun on Saturday. Certainly Ojulari seems to be enjoying himself as well when it comes to getting after the quarterback, which he did successfully once again against Tennessee. Here is Azeez himself on his own performance.
I mean, it's feel great to just know that we have more things we can work on. It's just great getting back there and hitting the quarterback and just doing what we need to do to create havoc for this team so we can continue to win.
Listen, I think that Ojulari is on his way to being one of the real star players part of this Georgia defense. This is a talented group overall, and as I said before, some of these guys we're still kind of waiting to see round themselves into full form. But for now, Ojulari is starting to look like a pretty finished product, and that's a great job of player development, physical development, strength and conditioning staff there as well. Ojulari is one of the real finds for Georgian recruiting, and one of the real examples of how player development seems to work at UGA. This is a success story right now. Ojulari on the field and the Georgia program for how it's built him up. That is really great to see. And with that said, let me transition back to Jake Fromm for a moment as part of our Heisman hierarchy presented by Kroger. Now, admittedly, we do this segment in the hopes that Georgia will have a player step up and be a full-fledged Heisman contender. And I really do believe, and we've kind of talked about both Jake Fromm and DeAndre Swift in this category, I really do believe that based on what Fromm showed on Saturday, his ability to lead the Georgia offense, the overall nature of his statistical performance, the fact that he continues to be pinpoint accurate, and just in control of the situation, I believe that Jake Fromm is in this race very much so right now. And as long as Georgia keeps its pace among the top national contenders, there's a spot for Fromm here in this discussion. Now, as Jake alluded to in the question I asked him from Saturday night, there are some quarterbacks around this country putting up eye-popping stats. Justin Fields is one, Jalen Hurts is one, Tua Tagovailoa is one, but Jake Fromm is doing plenty for Georgia right now, and there's obviously more to being a Heisman contender than just ringing up the scoreboard and just filling up the stat sheet. Jake Fromm is doing a little bit of everything for the Dogs at the moment, and so there's a lot of football left to be played. But there's no doubt in my mind that Jake Fromm is very much in the heat of this discussion, and he should be, and by November, it may be an even more intense conversation happening around Fromm. So that's our Heisman hierarchy. It's brought to you by our friends at Kroger, and by the way, we're getting ready for Halloween, and my kids, you better believe, are getting excited. Well, you can get excited as well at Kroger because there's fresh frights at your local Kroger in time for Halloween. You can save on everything from home decor to costumes. Of course, spooktacular sweets, as they like to say. Also, how about big savings on this? You can use your Kroger Plus card and get on Hershey's assorted sweet tart candy and a whole lot more. Get yourself some Halloween candy and some Halloween goods right there with our friends at Kroger just in time for Halloween. All right, so to say goodbye to you here, a couple quick reminders. First of all, as I said with John Stinchcomb, we are looking forward to being at Marlowe's in Dunwoody 2 Thursdays from now. That's October 17th for our Marlowe's matchup, looking ahead that day to the game against Kentucky. I know there's a little bit of confusion sometimes. We do the Marlowe's matchup show now every Thursday, but like this week it'll be from our DawgNation World Headquarters Studios, friendly confines here. So, but it's on the road before the Kentucky game, October 17th. Marlowe's in Dunwoody. We'll see there at 6 p.m. for that. Also, as I said before, if you're scared of Florida because they beat Auburn, then just go ahead and say so. If you're scared, just be scared. Go ahead and say that you're scared. Around here, we are not. Around here, we haven't changed our tune on this at all. We've enjoyed watching the Gator Hater updater climb, and we look forward to seeing that keep going. In fact, how many days has it been? Let's show you on the video screen right now. 1,073. Gator Hater Updater. That thing ain't going anywhere anytime soon. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. We got a good little window of time to do a good number of comments here, so we'll try to knock a lot of these out. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. Speaking of knocking stuff out, R.S. Andrews can knock out all of those things for you. And yes, I told you we're in the process of moving studios. There's a little bit of growing pains with that. One of the issues that I have had, and this is an issue all on me, is our buddy Eddie has missed his call time here a couple times here. He's been in his trailer still and has not made his way onto the desk. That is solely my error all the way around. But we'll make sure we get Eddie back on the desk here. That is not a good job by me, especially in a time when there's uncertainty and there's nervousness in the air. All of a sudden, Florida's eked out a win against an Auburn team that couldn't move the football and whatever. So we're not worried about that. Eddie's presence will be proof of that. Tough game, of course. It's the SEC. You expect to have a team tape up and buckle its chin strap and come after you. You wouldn't expect anybody to lay down and die. I'm sure Florida's not going to do that either. But we don't think Georgia's going anywhere in that cocktail party rivalry anytime soon. But you can give us your thoughts on that or anything else you want to discuss. R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Make sure you find them online at rsandrews.com, whether it be time for new water heater, whatever else you got going on. All those major systems, kind of the stuff behind the walls that you can't see with your own eye, but R.S. Andrews makes its expertise, its livelihood out of knowing all that kind of stuff. R.S. Andrews can help you out with all of that. All right, let me go over here and we'll get a lot of your comments, then we'll get ready to rock and roll. Marcinio Askew says, I'm not scared, I'm concerned. Well, that's certainly fair enough. Dwayne Parker says, B.A., what do you think about Zeus? Yeah, I wish we would have had more time, longer show to talk more about him because I do think, and it's weird to me, right? One of the things I'll never quite understand is, Zamir White gets a lot of love from Georgia in terms of being a part of the game plan on Saturday, not as much against Notre Dame. I won't pretend to know what made one game different than the other, but for those people who may have wondered, and I may have even been one of these, that wondered, was he just going to be less a part of the offense based on his light use or no use at all against Notre Dame? Well, I think the game against Tennessee shows that Zamir is still a big part of this and still a very tough, hard runner for UGA. It's great to see. And one of the things I was also going to talk to John more about, we just kind of ran out of time, was the overall depth for Georgia at running back. Once again, you got a big play from Brian Harrion in this game. I feel validated in my belief that Harrion is an important part of this Georgia offense, and Zamir White there is as well. So we're still figuring, as fans, and observers, media types, watching this team, we're still trying to figure out the overall pecking order, right? The overall hierarchy within these position groups. Wide receiver, at running back, and after the Notre Dame game, it looked like Georgia might be content to make DeAndre Swift the sole focus of the rushing attack, at least the primary focus of the rushing attack. And on Saturday, it was back again, feeling a little bit more like an ensemble cast, with Zamir White as a big part of that. I love to see it. It's a great question. Marcus Bass says, do you think the Braves will end the where'd Marcus go? Basically he said, do you think the Braves are going to end up beating St. Louis today after at one point in time it looked like the series might be over? I'll say this very, very quickly. I thought that Donaldson's double yesterday was potentially a seminal moment in modern Braves history, much the same way that Dave Roberts' stolen base might have been for the Red Sox in the 2004 ALCS. There are a lot of Braves fans after Game 1 who thought that series was over. You get the huge performance from Foltynewicz in Game 2. You get a big-time pitching performance from Soroka yesterday in Game 3, but the Braves were generating no offense against Adam Wainwright. And then Donaldson starts off the ninth on the double and then provides a chance for Dansby to be a hero and for Duvall to continue his great work. But the Donaldson double may have changed the Braves' feeling about their own ability to succeed. Marcus, I'm glad you asked the question. Let me go to YouTube here for a moment. We'll talk some more UGA, and I'll get back to Facebook here in just a little bit as well. Of course, anything you want on the table for today as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Jermaine Jones asking about opposing fans showing up on the show. There's always going to be some of that, especially as big as our YouTube audience, gets. Keeping in mind that most people watch the show after it's already done. People are going to hear about the show, and they're going to kind of get involved there on that. Yes, as someone asked in the YouTube comment section, Florida does play at LSU on Saturday, so that'll be a very interesting thing to see. What else is going on here on YouTube? Double R says the Braves game was epic yesterday. It was epic. I can't wait for this afternoon, too. It's been really fun. BA's daddy on YouTube asking me about Eddie. Yeah, I admitted this before that I just have a couple days now in a row. I've just forgotten to put him up here. It's a bad job by me. He's busy doing other things for us right now, but it's just a bad job by me. Stacey Goebel says he actually wants Florida to be undefeated when they roll into Jacksonville. Nothing like crushing their dreams. And, Stacey, there is something to be said for this game feeling much, much bigger by the time you get there. But as one of our commenters also mentioned, let's find out what happens at LSU on Saturday, because much the same way that Auburn had more at stake at Florida than Florida had at Auburn, it's kind of the same thing for Florida on Saturday. Now, they could lose to LSU and still win the national championship. Auburn, for instance, in 2013 lost to LSU and still played for it, won the SEC that year. So, it's certainly not a prerequisite that you have to win at LSU. Georgia last year would have made the college football playoff even after losing to LSU, assuming it had beaten Alabama in the SEC championship. So this isn't a prerequisite game for college football playoff contention, but it is a pretty interesting measuring stick game. If you really want to say this is a Florida team that's much improved, this is a Florida team on its way to validating the hopes and dreams of these goofball Gators fans, if you really want to say that, then don't even win the game against LSU. Just go toe-to-toe. Just go toe-to-toe. Just do this upcoming Saturday what Georgia couldn't do a year ago, because last year Georgia got beaten up pretty good inside Death Valley. If Florida wants to prove that it's a legit contender, then just play a little bit better than that. For me, the standard's not even winning the game. I will give Florida a little bit more credit and say, hey, Dan Mullen really is doing a decent job, even if they just go toe-to-toe. They just don't get whitewashed against LSU. I'll give them a little bit of credit. So let's see. Let's see where it goes. But Stacey Goldberg brings up a pretty good point that ultimately it's not Georgia's job to cheer when someone else does harm to Florida. It's Georgia's job to vanquish the hopes and dreams of the Gators itself, and I think that's really good. I think that's a really fair and interesting point. Frederick Jones also asked a great question. When is DawgNation coming to Southwest Atlanta? Frederick, that's a very, very good question and something we need to do very soon. We were a little south of Southwest Atlanta back during the summertime, but we need to get over there and be in that part of the city here very soon, because we have not done that, I don't believe, and obviously many of you know our DawgNation World headquarters is right here in Atlanta. Daniel Aldrich says Florida fans have come out of their mud hole. They think they're going to beat us. Yeah, I mean, they are undefeated. They got a big win over Auburn. I'm sure they're happy. I'm not going to say they shouldn't be, but, let's not make it more than it was. Tram Dog says, I just hope these teams stay unbalanced. Let our defense pin their heads back all night long. And that's a really good point, Tram. And this will be something I'm looking for from Florida. Both in going back and re-examining the Auburn game, looking at LSU on Saturday, South Carolina, which is also going to sandwich before Florida plays Georgia. The one thing I said in our forum at forum.dawgnation.com on our post-game show, the Pella Window post-game show from down on the field at Neyland Stadium, there is no recipe for beating Georgia that doesn't include rushing yards. If you are a team looking to pull the upset against UGA, you better have some rushing yards. Look at the games in which Georgia has played the worst. Auburn in 2017, LSU last year, Sugar Bowl, if you want to count that. The worst Georgia performances, the ones that end up leading to losses, they include rushing yards for the opposition. Now, not every team that's run the ball against Georgia has ultimately lost, but you're not going to beat Georgia one-dimensional only throwing the ball. You're just not going to do that because Georgia's going to run the ball too well. You can't give up rushing yards and not also get rushing yards, just giving up too much of the physicality to your opponent at that point in time. So that's one of the things I'm curious to see from Florida. It's one of the reasons why even when Georgia was kind of scuffling along with Tennessee, there was no outcome, no storyline that was going to lead to a Tennessee win on Saturday just because they cannot run the ball against Georgia. Most teams this year have not been able to Georgia's credit. Same with Notre Dame. Notre Dame is, kind of hanging around all night with UGA, but they're not really running the ball, and that's just not going to get Georgia beat. So let's watch Florida against LSU on Saturday. LSU defense has struggled a little bit. If Florida goes in that stadium and runs the ball a little bit, at that point in time, you say, well, you better be ready to buckle your own chin strap when you get ready to play them. But if any team is out there saying, we're gonna shock the world and prove Georgia's a paper tiger, you better be ready to run the ball. You better be ready to do that. Now, Jordan Davis' status, obviously it makes it a lot easier to run on Georgia when Davis is banged up. Kirby will talk more about that today. Didn't give much of an update this past Saturday. Maybe slightly hopeful, but we shall see. We shall see. Will says he believes that Georgia needs its starters back on defense. If you want to include Davis in on that, you're absolutely right. Campbell, I think, as well. Campbell would sort of been nice to have Campbell on Saturday. I mean, ultimately, what I want to see from these defensive backs a little bit, Will, is, the Georgia pass rush, Aziz did get after it a couple times on Saturday. The overall havoc rate percentage actually probably looks okay. The Eric Stokes and Tay Crowder scoop and score moment near the end of the game really helps with that. But ultimately, what I really want to see from these Georgia defensive backs is a little more physicality at the line of scrimmage. Give me that one good pop on the would-be receivers to give that extra second for the Georgia pass rush to get a chance to get there, right? I mean, I feel like that it's that close, right? Just, one extra second, I think, makes all the difference in the world. One moment where the quarterback has to pump that football one time because that receiver's not quite into his route yet. The reason why he's not quite into his route yet is because, boom, he got thumped right there at the line of scrimmage. It's that one more thing that you need from this group. And if you do that, especially on those inside routes, on those slant routes, because all that is the receiver trying to get his body in front of the defensive back. Some of that's partially about speed, but it's also about who controls the ground. And being the more physical guy at the line of scrimmage before holding becomes a thing and before pass interference becomes a thing, that zone where the contact is allowed, taking advantage of that, I think that changes the fortunes for Georgia. It certainly matters against a team like Alabama, whose receivers are really, really good. How physical you are with that group at the line of scrimmage goes a long way towards that. Harry Lloyd on the subject of punting right now. Yeah, I've defended Camarda. I've said that I believe that Jake will eventually kind of shake out of the funk that he's in. And admittedly, one of his punts on Saturday was better than the other. But the one that was not good was not good. And you can't just be good on 50% of your punts. That's a clear issue for Georgia. I think right now, I would say that the job here is for Camarda to improve as much as he can. Unfortunately, he may just be way, way better than anybody that's competing with him for playing time. So given that Camarda is struggling the way that he is, and at this point in time you can't sugarcoat it, Camarda is struggling mightily, given that the case, then the responsibility falls on Kirby Smart to coach around this, right? Don't punt from inside not your own, but don't punt from the other side of the 50 inside the 45-yard line. Don't do that. Stop doing that. There were a couple of examples on Saturday where I thought that Kirby either made some bizarre choices or just some overly conservative choices. The draw play on what was 3rd and 9 that's ended up setting up a 29-yard Rodrigo Blankenship field goal. I mean, I know you've got a great kicker, and nobody loves Rodrigo more than I do. But in that moment, you got to try to find a way to get the touchdown. It's 3rd and 14. It's a draw play that gets 5 yards that that turns it into whatever. I just think you hate to see it right there. You want to see more aggressive in that situation. Also, as I said before, even the decision to punt inside the 45, it's just not an aggressive decision. I think all football coaches, generally speaking, should be more aggressive. But when you've got the better talent, the better team, I think you've got an even greater responsibility to be more aggressive in that situation. I think that Kirby Smart made a couple blunders there in that regard. Smart coaching staff, but that's a bad decision. And to say nothing of being in shotgun on 4th down, I don't mind you going for it. I think you should. I think you should go for it on 4th down more frequently. I actually didn't even have a problem with the 2-point conversion there as well. Just go for it. Be aggressive. Push. Georgia could go for 2 every time. I'd be happy about that. But I don't like shotgun on 4th and short. Scott Peterson says he disagrees. Jimmy Hunter says the mic volume might be a little bit low. Sometimes I talk lower during the segment. I don't mean to. So we might want to just tap that up just a little bit, I guess, if you are hearing it a little bit low. Like I said before, this is the cool down, so I'm kind of in a relaxed mode here, so I am talking a little lower. Jimmy Hunter says broadcast volume or something. Matthew McGahee says, what is your opinion of South Carolina now? I think that South Carolina is actually getting to be a little bit better of a team. I think they're starting to improve. I really like Helinski at quarterback. I think Helinski's a better freshman quarterback than Bo Nix is. And I think that I think he makes them more dangerous. Now, once again, this is a team that's also not great at running the football, so in terms of challenging Georgia, maybe not. Tavian Feaster kind of is what he is at this point in time. But I think that Helinski is kind of a real deal quarterback, and I think that this is a better – it's almost a little bit like Missouri in that the same way that, they kind of shook off the early loss to Wyoming. I think that South Carolina's starting to shake some things off there as well. I thought I had a chance to watch them a good bit in the Kentucky game a couple of weeks ago, and I actually thought they looked pretty good there in that game. I thought they looked pretty good there. Tim Griffin says, stop playing not to lose, play to win. That's certainly probably a fair statement. Derek Tillman on the subject of Azeez Ojulari, yeah, that's for sure. Jimmy Guthrie also says that South Carolina has a legit defense. They do. I mean, one of the areas in which South Carolina's got some players that Georgia would have wanted is there on that defensive line. Of course, I'll remember the Rick Standage drama that Georgia was definitely making a push for him. Zach Pickens, I know that Georgia would have loved to have had him. So Muschamp is a pretty good recruiter, and some of that is on that South Carolina defense right now. Zenti Zelo Allen on Facebook says, we need to teach more pass rush technique. All I see is bull rushing. Boy, Chuck Smith talks about that kind of stuff a lot. No moves. You can't muscle your way into the backfield against every team. Probably fair. Somebody mentioned Brian Edwards, the South Carolina wide receiver. That's certainly the big one, the one that the Gamecocks seem to be primarily focusing on. Shelton Tucker says, does everyone realize we talk about the same thing every week, slow start? Yeah, part of that, though, Shelton, is the fact that, for a team that's as popular as Georgia is, and for a team that has the expectations that are as high as Georgia's are, everything's going to be kind of magnified. Everything's going to just be, put under a microscope, under a magnifying glass. So part of the reason why we talk about the same things every week is because everything about this team is just so granularly obsessed over, which I understand. Matthew McGahee says, is there an update on Jordan Davis? So after the game, Kirby Smart said he didn't have much to say about this. He did call it a sprained ankle. The definition of that's pretty nonspecific, so that in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean anything. And he said it may not have been as bad as some of the others. I'm not even really quite sure which others he was referencing when he said that, but certainly he didn't seem to be – he kind of struck a hopeful tone, I guess, a little bit when it comes to Davis on that. So we shall see. I'm sure he'll say more about that today. It's what? Almost 10 after 11. Kirby will speak in about an hour. He'll definitely be asked about Davis there. My guess is he gives you more of an update there at that time. Christopher Wilson says, when's DawgNation going to visit the Border Bash in Augusta? Something I've always wanted to do. I know that'll be getting cranked up again this weekend. I've always wanted to be there for that. I've always wanted to see that. I've never gotten a chance to. I love Augusta, so I'd love to do that at some point in time. Richard Smith says, Julian Rochester looked great. Yeah, I was really happy to see Rochester back in the game again after some kind of cryptic, odd comments from Kirby, right? He's said that he's not hurt anymore. He's just not playing now, or up until Saturday, not playing because of the competition, because he's trying to work his way to being back on the field again. And with Davis out on Saturday, it provided Rochester a chance to be in the game, and I was glad to see it. I think that Julian Rochester is still an important part of this roster, and for Georgia to be at its full strength best, I think Rochester needs to be a part of that. James Bryan also says we wouldn't be talking about slow starts if Georgia didn't get off to slow starts, and that's also probably true as well. David Hill says, I wonder what the final score would have been without the blown coverage and the personal foul call by Marshall, 43-3. Yeah, the Marshall miscue has got to be added into this because there's just no excuse for that. By the way, also a lot of extracurricular stuff on the Tennessee side there as well. Pretty clearly, given the fact that Wanya Morris was involved in some of that, seems like he's got some extra motion about playing against Georgia, and you kind of understand that. Kirby did kind of reference the feelings on both sides because of the connections between the schools. You've got Georgia players who are siblings with Tennessee commits. You've got Tennessee players who grew up in Georgia, maybe wanted to be recruited by Georgia. Obviously, the coaches know each other really well. There's a lot of tangled webs between Georgia and Tennessee, and you kind of saw some of that on Saturday, right? You kind of got the feeling that these two teams knew each other really well. Miriam Martin Corbin says bring back Kevin Butler to work with the specialist. Maybe that would help Kamart at this point in time. Justin Glaze says that Davis' ankle could have fallen off, and Kirby would say it's a sprain. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and that's one of the reasons why I don't make much of about an ankle sprain one way or another, because I don't know that the New England Journal of Medicine is necessarily effectively defined an ankle sprain. Maybe it has, but it seems like those kinds of phrases in sports, especially football, kind of get tossed around willy-nilly. But I think you can read body language on stuff like this from time to time, and Smart's body language on the on the Davis thing was at least a little bit more positive than he might be with some injuries. And gosh knows Davis is an important player, so Kirby's going to be, pretty concerned about that. Phil Rogers says, how do we attack South Carolina on Saturday? Phil, I think back to the 2017 game where I thought that South Carolina did a pretty good job of limiting Georgia's run. Now, last year, Georgia's kind of obliterated from the word go. I think that this game probably mirrors the 2017 game, maybe a little bit more so than the 2019 game where, Muschamp and his staff, T-Rob, they try to have a little bit of a game plan built around trying to limit the Georgia running game early. Remember, I'm pretty sure, and y'all can Google me on this, didn't the keep chopping phrase that became so popular in 2017, didn't that start with South Carolina, or didn't it get popularized around the South Carolina game? Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I feel like I'm not. That kind of thing came in vogue for South Carolina, that Kirby said it's hard to run the SEC. It was hard for Georgia to run on South Carolina at the beginning of that game, but obviously Georgia wore them down over the game. And for as much as the slow starts are an issue now a couple games in a row, the other thing that Kirby's going to point to from the positive, and you can decide to care about this or not, but the other thing that Smart's going to point to from the positive is that Georgia clearly seemed to be wearing down Notre Dame towards the end of that game. Definitely was doing that to an overmatched Tennessee team this past Saturday. And now maybe some of that same kind of stuff against the Gamecocks this week, where Georgia leans on South Carolina, runs when it can the first half, and then tries to do more of that in the second half. That's not always the game plan that fans necessarily love, but it kind of leads to a dominant victory, if not always the most satisfying victory, and we may see more of that this upcoming Saturday. Matt Rukavina says Georgia needs to beat South Carolina so bad that Marshawn Lloyd flips after the game. That's kind of a funny line. JY says Hot Rod's one of the most automatic players that I've ever seen. Yeah, it is really amazing how good Rodrigo is. I mean, we take it for granted, but next year Georgia's going to be finding out that not every kicker's I don't even know who the kicker's going to be. I'm just saying whoever it is, matching the level of automated success that Blankenship seems to have perfected, that is not an easy thing to do. That's a very, very good point. Very good point. All right, let me just do a couple more here. Leon Hutchinson says he's going to homecoming. Just found out I'll be there. Is Kentucky homecoming this year? I'm embarrassed. I don't even know. Is it Kentucky? Is that the homecoming game, or is it Texas A&M? I know A&M's kind of a weird homecoming opponent, but all Georgia's got left are SEC games at home. Justin Glaze says, are we at our average sack goal? So all I know about the goals for Georgia is they wanted a havoc rate of 20%. They should be right there around that. However, what I said I wanted for Georgia was 40 sacks. So let's see where Georgia is on that number for a second. Let me see if I can talk and manipulate this computer at the same time. So let us get over here. So through 5 games, Georgia's at 15 sacks. That gives them 3 sacks per game. Am I doing the math on this correct? So they're at 3 sacks per game. So if they were to play 15 games, they could get to 45 sacks. So, I mean, at 15 sacks through now the problem with the total sacks is it also counts. Let me be tedious for a second. A half sack ends up counting as a whole sack for team totals. So let's say that 2 quarterbacks get to the quarterback at the same time, they each get a half sack. You end up counting those, at least some statisticians do, as 2 sacks for the team total here. So keep that in mind as you kind of go through all of this. But yeah, Georgia's at 15 for right now, and if we take that as the accurate number, then that gives you a chance to get to 45 if you play for the national championship. So that's certainly fairly on pace for what I said I'd hope for. So not too bad. Devin Glenn said, if Hot Rod gets drafted, he's the GOAT. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of kickers don't get drafted, but I would think that Blankenship has a great chance to get drafted. Great chance to get drafted. You can use him on kickoffs, and a lot of place kickers in the NFL don't do that, and he's just so good from distance. Nicholas King says, how concerned should we be with the secondary? If we play like we did in quarter 1 against Missouri and Texas A&M, they might be hard to contain. That's probably true. I guess here's what I'll say. I believe that a couple breakdowns here and there are worth the trade-off to be as aggressive as Georgia's trying to be. There's no free lunch. When you choose to be aggressive in one regard, you're going to have a little bit of a vulnerability in another regard, and Tennessee on Saturday took advantage of that. They used their good receivers. They got position on the Georgia guys, and they made a bet that Georgia would miss the tackle, and they did, and it turned into bigger gains. Obviously, as Kirby said, you want to tackle a little bit better, but in terms of putting your receivers on an island, forcing them to do a lot of stuff in man coverage, tight man coverage, which is what Georgia wants to play, you're going to have the occasional breakdown, and Tennessee's receivers are good enough to take advantage of that. So for me, it's a small concern. It's not unconcerning, but it's a small concern. Overall, I think the trade-off that Georgia's seeking here, which is a chance to go out and be dominant with a pass rush, even though that hasn't quite fully materialized yet as well as it might, I think the trade-off's kind of okay. So I'm not telling you I'm not concerned. I'm saying that it's not a panic situation for me. I mean, it is a 4-quarter game, right? And being a 26-point favorite doesn't mean jumping out to a 26-0 lead. It means using the full 60 minutes to win the game by as easy a margin as experts kind of thought it was going to be. So I think we have a tendency to just overstate what a slow start. TV audiences love Georgia getting off to a slow start, or any ranked team getting off to a slow start. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of this. Oklahoma got off to a little bit of a slow start against Kansas on Saturday, so much so that when I'm driving down the road to Knoxville because we left Saturday morning, Twitter's just buzzing about, is Kansas going to keep it close against Oklahoma, because we're begging for that. But the same way that, not because we hate Oklahoma, just because we want to see something unusual happen. Same thing with Georgia and Tennessee. There's this excitement of, a highly ranked team is losing. There was a little bit of a slow start for Alabama against Ole Miss, I think, a couple weeks ago. So there's this excitement when number 3 team in the country is kind of, in a game a little bit longer than people expect. But ultimately, these things have a way of working out the way they're supposed to. The NCAA tournament's the same way. 1 seed against 16 seed. Oh, it's a 2-point game in the Syracuse region, or whatever you want to say it is. And then all of a sudden, the 1 seed wins by 22 points. That's just kind of the way it goes. Byron Dean Butler, how about them Braves? Totally agree with you on that. Let's Philip Jordan Wells, cannot disagree with you. I thought the officiating was terrible on Saturday. Not necessarily one-sided against Georgia, just inept, just incompetent. Getting down in distance wrong a couple times. I mean, it was really, really bad showing by the SEC officials on Saturday. Lonnie Floyd says, what do you think about Georgia being tied with Ohio State for 3rd? I actually don't mind this kind of stuff. I think that Georgia every now and then needs a little bit of whatever the opposite of rat poison is. And, having Ohio State move up in the polls, I don't think Kirby Smart minds that at all. Having somebody maybe doubting Georgia, there was some stuff being said about Fromm going back after the Notre Dame game. I don't think Georgia minds that kind of stuff. I think they probably like it. I think they probably can use that. So to the extent that the polls really matter, the fact that the national consensus is a little bit more wait and see on Georgia and a little bit more laudatory of Ohio State, I have a tendency to believe that programs typically like that kind of stuff. Lee Bridges says, what are your thoughts on LeCount? I think that despite the fact that he had an interception, and I guess he also had a tackle for loss as well, despite that, I don't think it was a very good game for Richie, all things considered. Now, I'm not watching the all-22 film, so take this with a grain of salt, but obviously he got beat bad on the double move. You blame Daniel for that probably as well. Daniel and LeCount both probably got beat on that one. Would end up being just kind of a total disaster. And, maybe there are a couple moments in which LeCount could have limited some of the big plays for Callaway and Jennings in the first half and probably didn't choose to do it. So ultimately, probably not a great game for LeCount. Saved himself a little bit with the interception, but I'm guessing that he's probably going to get a little bit of a encouragement session or two coming off of the game when he's watching that on film. So I think that LeCount continues to be among the most talented players this Georgia defense, and clearly he shows you flashes of brilliance from time to time, and he's still a player that I believe in, but admittedly Saturday was probably not his best day. Jermaine J.C. Copeland says, I hope we get Ohio State in the playoffs. That looms as a strong possibility. It looms as a very strong possibility. All right, let me do one more, then we've got to go. Yeah, it's getting late because I got stuff I got to do. Matthew McGay, he says, Clemson looks very vulnerable and beatable. Yeah, I think it's hard to be a defending national champion. I think that Clemson's living with that right now. They're probably better come playoff time, a little bit more focused at that point in time, but there's a little bit of a lull we see oftentimes for defending national champions, and Clemson may be an example of that. Jeremy Lloyd talking about some bad officiating in a high school game. Yeah, you get some of that from time to time, too. Matt Talley says LeCount got beat early and then tightened up. Every defensive back in the world gets beat every once in a while. He's definitely tackling a lot better this year, so that's probably a good, well-rounded assessment of LeCount's game. James Bryant says, is Connor apt? On Mondays, Connor's typically in Athens, so I kind of fly solo on this day, which means I got some technical work I got to do for the radio show and podcast once we get off the air. Justin Glaze says I've also got to pull a Superman and get on the Falcons gear. Yeah, well, we'll have AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite, coming up at 1 p.m. today on the AJC Atlanta Falcons News Now Facebook page. Y'all come over there and join me on that show today because, man, it's going to be tough. There's some Falcons fans who are very, very upset, and they should be. Falcons probably need to make major changes. Coach, GM, probably everything. So, yeah, y'all come over there and keep me company today because I imagine that's going to be a pretty nasty comment section today. John Benton said, could the loser of the LSU-Florida game still make the college football playoff? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The loser of that game is not eliminated on Saturday. Hayes Callaway says we're going to see Alabama this year. I've predicted LSU wins the division, but Alabama still looms as a possibility. I did think it was interesting. I saw where Bet Online had odds to make the college football playoff. Bama's still at 2.5 to 1, ahead of Georgia and LSU, both at 7 to 1. Auburn was at 66 to 1. Florida was at 20 to 1. So interesting that with all these SEC teams kind of jumbled together right now, the betting folks, at least at Bet Online, still have Alabama well out in front. Blake Green says, is the 24.5 point spread this week fair? My guess is probably even climbs a little bit before you get to Saturday. I actually assumed it might be a little higher than that, so we shall see. Nick Lurch says, what time is the Falcon show? It's 1 p.m., and the name of the Facebook page, because we're actually getting started on YouTube, but we've been Facebook only up until now. It's AJC Atlanta Falcons News Now on Facebook. We'll have a YouTube page on that for eventually, but for now I can tell you it's the AJC Atlanta Falcons News Now Facebook page. Kevin Nunley says, good meeting me on Saturday. Kevin, I'm glad we got a chance to do that. I absolutely remember that. There's so many nice people we met in Knoxville. I just love being on the road, getting a chance to hang out with Georgia fans. Derek Tillman says, do you still feel the same about Florida? Yeah, Derek, we talked about this a little bit earlier. We always knew that Florida would be good defensively, and we always knew that Florida would be a little suspect on offense. So after all these games, they got to win against Auburn. You'll give them a little bit of credit for that. But ultimately, Florida is about what I thought they would be. And, frankly, the Georgia fan should be looking to his own team or her own team to go out there and take Florida down a peg. It's not Auburn's job to do that for Georgia. It's Georgia's job itself. And so from that standpoint, no, I really haven't changed my tune on that at all. Jay Y says, will you be in Athens on Saturday? You better believe it, Jay. We'll see you for the Kroger kickoff before the game, outside the dog walk, and then after the game in the UGA bookstore for our Palomino postgame show. Let us see what else. Anything on YouTube before we go? Scott Harris says Herring is to running back what Hot Rod is to a kicker. That's actually a pretty good, analogy because these are veteran players in this Georgia team, and Georgia really needs what Brian Herring provides. I agree with you on that. All right. Let's get ready to go. Let me also say our friends of the AJC, Braves do have a big game in St. Louis this afternoon. Of course, the AJC's got great coverage of that. That's fun stuff. It's in St. Louis, so go to AJC.com and keep up with all the sights and sounds. As of me starting the show, the Braves had not officially announced a Game 4 starter. Pretty sure it's going to be Dallas Keuchel. That may have already been officially announced. But follow, the whole team there in St. Louis from the AJC for that. And there's huge coverage from Busch Stadium, and they'll have all the stuff on Keuchel and whoever ends up starting Game 4. So follow along. Check in throughout the day, AJC.com to get your Atlanta news now. And, of course, I know there's also some less happy news involving the Falcons. Eventually, they're going to have to fire Quinn. They're probably going to have to fire Thomas Dimitrov as well. I believe that Falcons owner Arthur Blank has told Steve Hummer from the AJC that's not the plan for now. So as that changes, and eventually I believe it's going to, but as that changes, check in with AJC.com for that too. Also, some interesting stuff from the regular news as well. So you can be in the know at the water cooler by checking in throughout the day for Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. Also, huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. They do all those things for us. They can do those things for you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That's a great thing about R.S. Andrews. So find them online for any of your air, heating, plumbing, or electric needs at rsandrews.com. Thanks for being here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union. You'll have a good afternoon. I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for more of our program. We'll look forward to talking to you then.